Just going to give it another minute or so for a few more assembly members to join us, then we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for turning the recording on. I'm going to go ahead and call this work session with the Board of Equalization to order. Let's start with a roll call.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Allard? Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Perez-Verdia? Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
And Ms. Zalato?
Thank you. I do want to note Ms. Quinn Davidson appears in our attendee list, but may not be able to speak at the moment. All right, so as usual, if assembly members want to get in the queue, please either put yourself in the chat or text me if you can't access the chat. Also want to invite members of the Board of Equalization to get in the queue as well if you have any comments that you'd like to add to this conversation. So for today, we're doing an overview of the annual report. I think we have a presentation to do that, and then see if there's any feedback or conversation with the board members who are in attendance. So I will go ahead and turn it over to the administration for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. This is Jack Adamus, Municipal Assessor. So I will share, and it's a really quick 8 slide presentation. So not trying, I know I'm sure Mr. G wants to maybe talk too as well, so I don't want to, I'll be quick. So a couple things here, just the Board of Equalization I just want to talk about. The first thing I just wanted to talk about here is just looking at the overview of the timeline for real property for the appeal process. And probably the first thing is that there's state statute that does spell a lot of this out, and then there's a lot of municipal code that is echoed in this. And so generally our process is right around the mid-January on before the 15th. That's in code. We do send notices to all real property. And then there's 30 days that once you receive that a property owner can appeal. That 30-day is actually both in code and state statute. What we call it is a 30-day informal review period. I'll touch base on that just a little bit more here on the next slide. And then again, that 30-day notice of the appeal deadline. What we also have is we have a 15 days after the appeal deadline to submit evidence. And this really does help us to try to timely process the appeals. Now, the one thing is if people do have additional evidence and they're trying to make a good faith effort to give it to us, we'll by all means allow evidence past that 15 days. But again, it really does help us with that as well. What happens after that? You can see that we then start to work with the appeal owner on that process. That happens from about mid-February to on around May. Then we have the Board of Equalization. Typically, that's about starting of April into May. This year, it did push into June a little bit more as well. Just a few things with that. And then if a property owner does go through this whole process, goes through the Board of Equalization, and then isn't satisfied with the outcome of the Board of Equalization, they do have 30 days to then appeal to the Superior Court. That again is in code as well. So I did want to touch base here a little bit. The valuation notice. There's a front and back side of the valuation notice when property owners get it. But there's a date on that where the appeal must be filed by. There's our phone number, obviously the back. I'm not going to talk too much about the back, but there is several paragraphs on that. But we have that phone number, and we do ask people if they do have a question about our valuation process or the values. And a lot does go into those values. There are quite often, up to 40 points of data, so to speak, if you have a single family home. That we keep track of. We do ask property owners to contact us, and that 30-day informal review period is very helpful. It's a great time to ask questions. Probably the best thing to do is contact us earlier than later. For this year, we did have about 158 properties that we did resolve and adjust. And they didn't have to file an appeal. So we do think that that can be really helpful right from the get-go. And that's maybe something that you don't see in a lot of the Board of Equalization and appeal data. So just moving on here. So looking at the workflow, I somewhat spelled this out with that, but let's say that I am a property owner, I appeal. The appeal then gets assigned to an appraiser. The appraiser then would work with me one-on-one with that. And then I would give them information and also tell them what I think's the problem. And then the appraiser then would make a recommendation, and they would then send a withdrawal letter. So maybe let's say that my home is assessed at $350, and let's say maybe I got an appraisal for $330. We'll send a withdrawal letter to you. Most likely in that case, we'll just send it a recommended value at that appraisal price. And then there's two things. If the recommended value I think it's reasonable and or I don't want to pursue it anymore, you can sign that withdrawal letter, and the appeal ends, and then there is the deposit that is returned. And yes, we do have an appeal deposit. Your average deposit for a single family home is $100. Most of them get you get back. But on the right hand, you can see here the withdrawal letter. If you don't sign it, then what happens is the Board of Equalization hearing does happen. So, and I'm sure Mr. G can tell you a little bit more or chime in with the Board of Equalization on a few things here. But a couple of things just to let you know with everything. The Board of Equalization, you, the Assembly, I'm sure you know this now, you appoint the Board of Equalization, the members of it. It's a quasi-judicial board, so it does make a decision on it. And one of the things that we're trying to do with property owners and the public is to make sure that they know, as you can see that second question there, they're not an advocate group. The role of the Board of Equalization, they're not mass appraisers. They're not trying to advocate for the taxpayer or the municipality. They are independent. Their focus is on the facts and findings of proof of unequal, excessive, improper, or undervaluation based on the facts. And that actually is what I just said, a quote from the Alaska state statute. So again, the state statute does spell out what that Board of Equalization is supposed to do. Now, what is in code, though, is this format here at the hearing. Typically, what does happen is it's about 5 minutes for the owner to say what they have for laying out the questions and issues at hand. The appraiser has 5 minutes, and then there's a additional 5 minutes to the owner. Then the Board of Equalization does make some type of determination based on that after they close testimony. There also is, I probably could put in there too, that there's a spot where the board can make and ask questions at any time during open testimony. So typically that's what happens. 5 minutes, it's a very relaxed, I'd say format. Often I've seen it that the chair will allow more time than that if it's complex. But that's kind of the gist of the Board of Equalization. This year, all of them were telephonic, and I was really impressed by the Board of Equalization handling that. So a couple more slides here. Just looking at what happened for 2020. If you did receive the Board of Equalization report from Mr. G, our apologies. We did send Mr. G some incorrect information. The total number of appeals you can see is 383, but the number that was settled without a Board of Equalization hearing, 236, not 234. And you can see there a couple of bullet points: settled without the scheduled hearing. Most of those did have some type of reduced value on that. Again, as you saw in that process, if you do withdraw that withdrawal, or if you do sign that withdrawal form, you do get your deposit back on that. That's, majority 62%. I know Mr. G did point out that that's a little bit lower than prior years, and so we're curious, and we're going to watch that carefully. You can see on the gray area, the 10%, this is kind of, and I used gray kind of for both figuratively and literally. Those are kind of appeals that are right in the middle. They're on the cusp of going to the Board of Equalization, but sometimes the property owners withdraw right before that hearing. So 39 there. Some of them also did fail to appear at the Board of Equalization. That's certainly one way. If you do fail to appear to the BOE, that's certainly one way you won't get your deposit back. You can see in the middle, 90% of deposits were returned. So I'm glad to see that majority of we're not trying to use that as a revenue source. That's largely there as a incentive to help the taxpayer, the property owner, work with the appraiser on the issues. And then finally, heard by the Board of Equalization, there was 108 that were heard, and about 27% of the values, they were reduced prior to the hearing. So remember that there's original value and then there's a recommended value. So 27% had a recommended value lower going into that hearing. The other thing that was interesting, at least this year, was that about a big chunk of the appeals, a little over a quarter of the appeals, were from just two property owners. And maybe that has something to do with the a little bit lower 62% than we've seen in the past for settled without a hearing. And then finally, that last bullet point, and I think Mr. G also has that in his presentation or his report, is that majority of the appeals that were heard by the BOE were upheld. The recommended value was upheld. I think that's
Before you continue, I have a question for you from Mr. Constant.
Thank you, Jack. I don't want to dig too directly into the two persons or two owners of 26%, but can you tell me where in town those were?
Yeah, I know at least one was in Girdwood, and then I have John Woodkey. I might have to phone a friend here and ask John Woodkey if he knows where the second one was.
Hi, Jack. This is John Woodkey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, they both were in Girdwood.
Thank you.
A set of vacant lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. So that's all I have for this, just kind of a couple of other things in there. Finally, I just wanted to mention, so one is that for 2020, and I'm sure Mr. G can talk about this too and expand on it, But largely, one of the things that we've been asking is we need your help, you being the assembly. So for 2020, there were 9 members that heard all of the 108 cases, and so there they are, all 9 of them. We do appreciate it, and I'm sure you as well do. And so yeah, maybe moving forward for next year too, it could be helpful to have you solicit more members for next tax year. That's all I have, so I'm just trying to be really quick here with 8 slides, and I don't want to steal any of Mr. G's thunder, so to speak.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. G, we would love to hear from you.
Well, I'm afraid I don't have any thunder for you to steal, Jack. Thank you for putting together that report. I do want to indicate or tell you that my last line on last paragraph on my report, I said that I reported last year that one owner with multiple properties submitted his appeal to the Superior Court, and it is my understanding that the Superior Court upheld the Board of Equalization's ruling. That is an error. They did hear it. I was out of state. Jim Fredericks, the co-chair, did listen to the appeal, and he felt that it probably will be upheld, but it has not been upheld since. This gentleman is also one of those that this year was had one of the multiple appeals out of Girdwood. So I think that problem or that issue will be resolved once the Superior Court makes a ruling. I can't add much to Jack's excellent report there. The one thing that I've talked about, and I was last year and to everybody, and we did get some new members. One great new member was Heather Flynn, who really stepped up to the board this year and did a great job. Looking back to reports back 10 years ago when I've been on the board now. This is the end of my 3rd term, so I've been on the board for 9 years. And the same issue was brought up back then, that there's a chronic lack of a number of people. We're supposed to have 15. It went well this year with 9, and I say that only because of the Herculean efforts of the staff, particularly Terry and Vivian of the assessor's office, who work with us to do the scheduling, and it very well, and I want to give them kudos on that. The thing that you need to be fully aware of is that 2 of them, both Jim Frederick and I, this is our last, we need to be reappointed for another 3 terms if indeed the Assembly wants us to stay on. Let's see, and Aaron Gray. So you've got James Frederick, Bill G, and Aaron Gray all terming out this year. And Aaron has been a stalwart in the commission. I hope he stays on, or in the Board of Equalization, and he's also been a chairman. And the other problem we have is that of the other 7 people, they all expire in 2022. And that, if they don't continue to stay on, that could get a big problem for the Assembly. Well, it's only a problem for you because you have to appoint us, but problem for getting enough people for the do the hearings. And I realize it's a bit of a problem for you to get to recruit people, because of the ones Jim Fredericks I got on board, and Al Tamangi and Tim Schrage. So really encourage you to talk to your constituents it'd be nice to have people from the various different parts of town. It'd be nice to have some younger people, and for me, anybody that's 60 and under is young people. Some of us are a little gray in the areas, so I won't go on any farther. That is the big concern that I have. The public is getting a little bit better informed as to what our function is. However, we do have to remind them generally, and if I'm chairing the meeting, I try to do it ahead of before we really get into it, that we are a pseudo judicial body and we are concerned only on the facts, and we cannot make a decision on emotion and non-fact areas, because as most of you, and if not all of you, are property taxpayers, and if you're like normal people, you don't like to pay taxes. I particularly don't mind it at all, but I'm old school. So we do, as Jack said, we do have to remind them that we are not advocates for them, because we do get some people that get a little irate and they'll say, I came here because I thought you people would stick up for me. And we have to say, well, if you had the facts to back up your argument, we may be able to do that, but we have to rule on facts. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have as to how the year went. It went well. And again, I encourage you wholeheartedly to recruit some new members. And I saw Jim yesterday. I don't see him on unless it's
I'm here.
Okay, Jim may speak whether he wants. I wouldn't mind going on another 3 years as long as Jim goes on, but we need to really do something about getting more members and getting those dates spread out so you don't have the chance of everybody choosing not to serve again all on the same year. And that's it. Any questions, I'll be glad to ask. And Jim, you can jump in if you'd like, please.
No, I have nothing further to add, except I did want to echo Bill's kudos to the staff. They did a really good job in a kind of a novel environment, keeping us well scheduled and providing us with our documents in a timely manner to prepare. That's really all I have.
Any questions?
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. G. Actually, before we get to discussion, I would like to take this opportunity to see if there are any other members of the Board of Equalization who'd like to introduce themselves, and then we can go to discussion. So
I don't believe there's.
Who was the gentleman speaking again?
Jim Frederick, I'm the co-chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Frederick. All right, so we'll go ahead and go through the queue. So first I have Mr. Weddleton.
Thanks. So there's a couple of points, and I think Jack or any of the members of the board, which I thank you all for doing that. It seems like an awful lot of work. And I just wonder, in cases where someone comes forward and has, I think what we've seen, and Alex will chime in too, is that, if you look at all the assessments, on average, they're very, very close to what, a building is appraised at, and since we're a non-disclosure state, that's challenging. But, they test, they say on average, we're very close, and that's a good thing. But there's certainly outliers too. So what do you do in a case where there is an outlier and someone can come forward and go, well, wait a minute, here's appraisals. And I know we don't really deal so much with appraisals in this realm, but they can show, well, this property right next to me is, a quarter of what I'm assessed. And this one right over here nearby is a quarter of it. And it's just so extreme that it should give pause. How do you guys handle that? Is there a mechanism?
I think if I can jump in here on that, when we get them, in fact, if it's the instance like you're talking about, John, where there are extremes, it will never get to the board because the staff, I found in my 10 years working or as a board member, the staff will have already taken that into consideration and probably have reduced the assessment. If in an instance where they are that extreme and it gets to the board, invariably we will send it back because, and a lot of it depends on when the assessment was made, or excuse me, when the assessments are always made January 1st. It's when the valuation. I'm old, John. The word's getting me. The appraisal. When the appraisal was made, is it current? Was it made prior to January 1st? What are the circumstances? We look at all those because that is definitely an item of fact. And we have reversed them. What we do not take into, if the appraisal is old, over 3 years or more, no, 2 years we take kind of, but if it's a current one and it's prior to the close to the January 1st, it definitely has an effect. Jim or Jack, you can pop in there.
So I see both. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if that's okay through the chair, this is Jack with a quick, maybe a little additional comment to what Mr. G is saying. So,
go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we didn't really talk about this too much, but one of the things that we create and prepare is what we call a BOE packet. It's a packet of information that shows, what the recommended value is, and then there's also going to be what the property owner has, what they said, all the information in there, and then we also write up a little blurb of what we think and why we recommend the value, and then we also include some supplemental information to support that value. And so I think it's true quite often what Mr. G is saying, if there is some type of outlier where we're because on average, we're 96% of assessed value, but that's the average. Obviously, there can be some outliers. And if there is, we typically look at that and say, yeah, maybe we're missing this one. And we try to not dig our heels in the dirt, so to speak. So a couple of things that we have in that packet to support our value. We look at equity grids. So if it's a vacant land, maybe we'll have a equity grid on the surrounding area of what their price per square foot is compared to the subject. Maybe a single family home, we'll do something as well. We also do a comparable sales grid typically to support, again, this is to support our value. This is not, directly used to value the property, where we'll take about 3 to 5 sales, and it'll be just like a fee appraiser where we have it laid out in a grid. Again, some type of indicated value range of what we think is reasonable and why. And if it doesn't support if the subject isn't in the bracket of that sales approach, that, it's probably not going to the Board of Equalization, like Mr. G said. So I guess hopefully that could help answer some of the questions that Mr. Weddleton's asking about outliers.
And Mr. Slivka, did you also want to address this question?
Yeah, I did want to echo again, both the assessor's office and then through the chief fiscal officer's office, we operate under the view of fairness and equity, and that's, I think you can see in the in the statistics that were presented in the report that Mr. G provided, that the vast majority of people who bring forward something, those assessments are reduced. And but there can be situations where the property owner, and I'll give you an example, may be unaware of the exact nature of their property. So we had a person come forward and say, my house is assessed at, my piece of property is assessed at $300,000 more than everybody else around me. Well, it turned out that his house, the land on his house, was in 4 distinct lots. And so each lot has its own valuation of roughly $100,000. Whereas if it had been one lot, then the valuation of that land would have been substantially lower. So, in every instance, there's usually a reason for why things are different. But I just echo what Mr. G said, and the vision of the assessor's office is fairness and equity. We take as much information as we can to provide an assessment and a tax, based on an appraisal that we believe is accurate.
Great, thank you. Did you have anything else, Mr. Weddleton?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm next in the queue. So I want to thank the board for all of its work. I know sort of on an annual basis, you all come to us about staffing issues, and so we want to definitely try to work and see what we can do to address that. So I want to make sure I got the numbers correct here. So right now, 9 out of the 15 positions are filled. Is that correct?
Yes.
So did you state that 4 of those positions, 4 of those 9 are going to be terming out soon? Did I get that number right?
3 of us.
3 of the 9. Okay.
Aaron Gray, Bill G, and Jim Fredericks. We're done this year. According to my, Jack, is Vivian? No. According to my records, we termed out this year. Is that your understanding, Jim?
Is that correct?
I don't think I agree with you, Bill. I think that we were re-upped at the beginning of 2020.
Okay.
I'd have to defer to the staff on that, but that's my recollection.
Mr. G, this is Vivian. You guys did re-up in the beginning of the season.
Okay, well, I was in error then. So we're there till 2023. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I must have been sick or something.
Your wish was granted. So you had also mentioned, Mr. G, about staggering terms.
Right.
So right now, what is it? Is it 50% every year that you guys lose? What does it look like right now in terms of the stagger?
Vivian, can you add to that a little bit? I don't think there's been one. We got into kind of a crisis mode where we tried to get a bunch of people. Isn't that right, Vivian?
I'm sorry, could the question be repeated one more time?
Well, did we have a staggered, like 3 every year or something, so we didn't all run out at the same time originally?
I believe so, yes.
And then we got in a bind, and so we appointed people, and it turned out that everybody's coming due at the same time.
That's correct.
So how do we? I don't know. I don't know if that can be done administratively, where you take a couple. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you would say 2 of them leave at 2022, and if a couple would agree to extend till 2020, well, maybe have 3 at 2020. 2022 and then extend it a couple more to 2024. And then we'd have people expiring in 2022, 2023, and 2024. But that would have to be something done, I think, by the assembly on their appointments.
Thank you. Yeah, so my guidance to staff then would be if we could get back to a sort of a 30-30-30 split, which right now looks like 3-3-3, but it'll be higher when we get to 15, cross fingers. I think that would be helpful, so that in every, no matter the year, there's no more than 1/3 of the board that might be termed out. And then I guess the last question I have before I go back to the queue. So can you remind us both if there is a sort of a position description, and if so, could that be sent to us? And then could you just give a quick reminder of the type of applicant that would be suitable to serve on the board?
You're asking who on that?
It could be you, Mr. G, or it could be Mr. Gadamus.
Oh, well, we've got quite a handbook that I think has a good job description, and it also points out what type of people we like to have. So I could get that. I can work with the staff and get that to you. I think that should come from the board, not from the staff, because we're the ones that have to. We're supposed to be a little bit autonomous there.
Thank you. So I think Ms. Ennis wants to also jump in on this one. Go ahead, Ms. Ennis.
Yeah, when we've got the 6 people, that was largely due to assembly effort, and they had I think they had cards of some sort that they brought to community council meetings. So we should just be able to find that again. And again, the assembly was who got most of those people on, and very, very helpful. It was the same year that the assembly approved their potential membership on the board. And then when I talked to them about the amount of work involved, they selected the card effort instead. But it's really largely due to your effort that we got all those members. And we certainly can administratively correct, maybe we have to come back to the assembly, the staggering.
Great, thank you. That'd be very helpful. All right, that's all that I had. Mr. Constant, were you in the queue?
Yeah, just briefly with what Dee just said. The reason we did that was because we anticipated a spike in questions on tax values after the earthquake. We just didn't know what was coming. And from a practical perspective, we could use the same framework, kind of what Dee was suggesting, in the context of COVID-related issues and what's happening with the market. Although the market is strong, certainly there are questions. And so from a marketing pitch, for sure we could use the same argument. We need help because, and it fits very closely in paradigm.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you.
I will then get that information to you, like you want a job description and the type of people. Is that correct?
Yeah, that information is helpful, as well as the information that Ms. Ennis was pointing out about those cards. I think those would be helpful for when we go to community councils or other gatherings. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mostly, I just wanted to thank Mr. G and the rest of the members of the board for all their hard work. Very much appreciate your service. And then I just wanted to mention, too, that a lot of times when issues of assessments come up at community councils, many folks believe that it's, it's part of an arbitrary process of the muni raises the values in order to be able to create the budget, right? And accordingly. And Mr. Weddleton is always really good at our councils about drawing attention to that 96% match of assessed value. And Mr. Gadamus's presentations, I think, are really helpful as well to help people understand. So I'm just making that, comment about there still is a little bit of a, pretty big misunderstanding about how it works. And I wonder sometimes too, Board of Equalization, I'm not suggesting you change the name, but it doesn't really scream out what it's about. And I guess those conversations with community councils are helpful. And I don't really have a suggestion as to how to get the word out on a broader level so people understand it. But I think there's still definitely that ongoing need. But most of all, thank you for your service and your work. Very much appreciated, Mr. G.
Thank you.
Mr. Gadamus? Oh, Mr. Gadamus, did you want to add anything? Saw your hand go down.
Yes, sorry, I do. Yeah, through the chair, if that's okay. I just want to maybe just add on a little bit to this. This is something that we certainly have identified, and so at least one of my goals. I've my experience before the assessor, I was an appraiser, and so once in a while I would have somebody that would go to the Board of Equalization, and I would be empathetic to them when they said, look, I thought that this process was going to be an advocate for me, the taxpayer. And so we have identified that. And there's a couple of things that we've done this year that hopefully has helped with some of the education. So my goal is that when somebody does go into that Board of Equalization room, they have an understanding and of what's going on. So we've been instructing our appraisers when they are working with that property owner to say a little bit about the information of what that process is. We've also been this year, at our little signature for email, we've been directing them to the FAQs for the appeal process. And I can maybe give you that link here just so that you guys can cruise through it. And so those are the two things that we've so far identified, but we are all ears of how to try to get better information to taxpayers, to property owners on the whole appeal process.
Great, thank you. All right, not seeing any further discussion. I want to thank again the staff and the board for all of your great work, and we will go through the process again, see if we can find some more applicants. So really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this work session. We will see each other again at 11:10.